What if the dinner table ritual that millions of people participate in every spring isn't just a historical reenactment at all?
Right.
Like, what if it's actually a highly classified ancient technology designed to completely hack human consciousness?
I mean, that is a staggering premise to start with.
Yeah, it really is.
But when you actually read the text we're exploring today,
Mm.
it's honestly the only accurate way to describe what is going on.
It's intense.
Exactly. We're looking at a system that demands a complete psychological override.
I think about how we handle system upgrades today, Usually when we talk about a software update, there's this expectation of just like mild passive annoyance.
Oh, for
Your
sure.
phone screen goes black, a little progress bar creeps across, and you just sit there staring at a blank piece of glass. You're just waiting for the bugs to be fixed.
Right, you tap, agree to some terms of service you definitely didn't read.
Exactly. And the machine just does the work for you. It's entirely automated. You don't have to look at the code, let alone rewrite it yourself.
Yeah.
But stepping into the world of ancient mystical traditions, specifically the Kabbalistic view of the Passover Seder that we're diving into today, that automated progress bar just vanishes.
It does. It completely disappears.
We're looking at a system upgrade that requires the user to actively tear down their own internal programming line by line.
It's the absolute definition of a manual, psychological, and spiritual override.
Yeah.
In this framework, you are the hardware, and you are the one responsible for writing the new code.
Wow. Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for this deep dive is to get way past the surface level story.
Definitely.
Whether you listening to this have attended 50 Cedars in your life or absolutely zero, our goal today is to show you how this night serves as a universal blueprint for personal liberation.
And it really is universal.
We're going to look at how entirely physical actions, eating a piece of flatbread, drinking a specific amount of wine, washing your hands at precise intervals, are actually designed to trigger spiritual lights right inside your mind.
Right. And the Kabbalists call these lights mohin.
Mohin.
Yeah. To give that term some grounding, mohin literally translates to brains or intellect.
Okay.
But in this specific mystical context, it refers to higher states of consciousness. It's the divine light, or expanded awareness, entering the human psyche.
I love that. But to understand the cure, I feel like we first have to thoroughly diagnose the disease, right?
Oh, absolutely.
If the Cedar is this profound software update, what exactly is the malware we are trying to delete here? We can't appreciate the solution until we understand the severity of the problem.
Well, the sources are unequivocal about the nature of this malware. It's defined by two major interconnected concepts.
Okay.
Egypt, or Mitzrayim in Hebrew, and Hametz, the leavened bread.
Let's start with Egypt, because I was struck reading this by how aggressively the text strips away the geographical and historical context.
It really does.
Egypt isn't a place on a map of the ancient Near East here. It's not a civilization that built pyramids.
No. In the Kabbalistic framework we're examining, Mitzrayim represents an internal psychological state that literally every human being grapples with.
Right.
The word itself comes from the root Mitzrayim, which translates to narrowness, straits, or like rigid boundaries.
So it's the internal narrowness of the human ego.
Exactly. The sources describe the Egyptian paradigm as the religion of selfishness.
The religion of selfishness. Wow.
Yeah, think of it as an entire operating system where every single action, every thought, every charitable donation, even every relationship, it's all fundamentally driven by the desire to receive for oneself.
The desire to receive for oneself, that phrasing is just so deliberate.
It is.
It goes way beyond just being a little bit greedy or, wanting a bigger piece of the pie.
Yeah.
It describes an entire worldview where you are the absolute center of the universe.
Right.
And everything else, other people, nature, and even spirituality, it all exists merely to feed your own satisfaction and validate your existence. It's the ultimate narcissistic enclosure.
And the sources make a stunning, almost counterintuitive point here to illustrate how dangerous this state actually is.
Oh, about the spiritual leaders.
Yes. They state that the Egyptian spiritual leaders, the sorcerers and priests of Pharaoh's court, were actually highly developed spiritually.
That blew my mind.
Right. They weren't ignorant idolaters just throwing rocks at the moon.
Yeah.
They deeply understood the spiritual mechanics of the universe.
Yeah.
They believed in the afterlife. They understood metaphysical forces. They comprehended the energetic grid of reality. And this is the kicker. They used all of that high-level spiritual technology purely for personal gain.
They wanted to harness the divine strictly to serve their own egos.
Exactly.
I find that terrifying because it is so incredibly relevant right now. I mean, it's the dark side of the modern wellness industry, really.
Oh, 100%.
You can use mindfulness, meditation, and spiritual awareness not to connect with humanity or something greater than yourself, but just to become like a more effective, more relaxed narcissist. You meditate so you can crush your competitors at work with less stress. You do yoga so you look better on social media. The Egyptian mindset isn't an absence of spirituality. It's the weaponization of spirituality for the ego.
That is such a brilliant modern translation of the concept. It's the hijacking of the sacred for the profane.
Yeah.
And this brings us directly to the physical symbol of that hyperinflated ego in the Seder, which is hametz, leavened bread.
Right.
The text defines hametz as the bloated ego, the pride, and the active fuel of selfishness.
Let's look closely at what yeast actually does to a mixture of flour and water, because it doesn't add a single ounce of nutritional value.
No, not at all.
It doesn't make the bread sustain you any better. It just adds air. It takes a small, dense piece of dough and just puffs it up.
Yep.
It makes it look bigger, softer, and far more impressive than it actually is. It is literally just hot air trapped in gluten.
And that physical process is the exact mechanism of the human ego. The sources state that eating hametz is about consuming warmth for the self.
Warmth for the self.
Right. The text draws a direct, uncompromising line between physical sickness and spiritual sickness caused by this ego-driven consumption.
Wow.
When we consume out of a desire purely to inflate ourselves, to gather warmth, comfort, and status only for our own isolated existence, we create a massive spiritual blockage.
Because we're separating ourselves from the Creator.
Exactly. The Creator's fundamental nature, according to this tradition, is boundless giving. If the divine is pure output, pure altruism, and we are pure input, pure selfishness, there's an absolute disconnect.
The two polarities just repel each other.
Right.
I want to challenge this a bit, though. Is the text arguing that all human desire is inherently toxic?
That's a great question.
Because if we have no desire to receive, I mean, we die, we have to eat, we have to seek shelter, we desire connection, are we supposed to become completely passive, desireless entities, just like spiritual statues?
No, and that is a crucial distinction to make. The Kabbalistic texts are very careful here. We don't destroy our human desires permanently. In this mystical tradition, the desire to receive is the fundamental foundational material of the human being. The Creator made us as vessels meant to receive.
So you need desire to exist.
Exactly. The goal isn't to obliterate the desire. The goal is to cleanse the desire of its arrogance. The issue isn't the flour and the water, it's the yeast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to the tech analogy, we aren't throwing the computer in the trash.
Right.
The hardware, our bodies, our fundamental human needs is fine, but the hard drive is bloated with malware that makes the computer only serve itself.
Yes.
We have to wipe the drive completely clean tonight so we can reinstall a healthy operating system tomorrow.
And the text notes a fascinating paradox that perfectly illustrates your point.
Right.
It says that thanks to the Matzah of Passover, thanks to this severe restriction and system wipe, we are actually allowed to eat hametz the rest of the year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If we didn't have the spiritual reset of the Seder, if we didn't force ourselves into this annual confrontation with our own arrogance, we would be entirely consumed by our egos permanently.
We zero out the system. We eradicate the puffed up pride. And once the system is clean and realigned toward altruism and connection with something higher, then the rest of the year, we can reintroduce the leavening. We can engage with the complexities, the ambitions, the messiness of normal life. But now those ambitions are running on a clean, virus-free operating system. They're driven by a desire to receive in order to give, rather than a desire to receive just to hoard.
It completely reframes the intense, almost obsessive process of cleaning for Passover that the texts describe.
Oh, yeah. The crumb hunting.
Right. It's not just spring cleaning. It's a meticulous psychological hunt for your own internal arrogance.
Yeah.
The text suggests that every crumb of yeast you're looking for in the corners of your kitchen is actually a tiny rationalization where you put your ego ahead of your soul. It's the small lie you tell yourself to justify a selfish act.
So eradicating the physical hametz is the physical trigger for eradicating the psychological hametz. Okay, so if the hametz, the Egyptian mindset, is the bloated ego we're aggressively deleting, the Seder plate itself is the diagram of the new hardware we're installing.
Yes.
We're replacing the religion of selfishness with a new dashboard. Let's look at the specific map of this new system, because the texts spend an enormous amount of time detailing the exact placement of everything on the table.
They do. The cedar plate, or kara in Hebrew, is described in these sources as representing Malchut,
Melchut.
yeah, which translates to kingship.
Yeah.
But in the Kabbalistic tree of life, the Sephirot, it represents the physical world. It's the lowest realm, the realm of action, where all higher spiritual forces finally manifest.
I see.
The plate is literally a physical map of the higher spiritual dimensions projecting down into our reality. It's a structural diagram of a perfected human soul.
The dashboard analogy feels incredibly apt here. Imagine you're sitting in the cockpit of a highly advanced spacecraft. The cedar plate is the control panel.
I like that.
And the placement of the items on this plate is not about, making the table look aesthetically pleasing for your guests. It's highly intentional, representing a delicate, dynamic balance of cosmic energies.
Absolutely.
Let's break down that dashboard, starting on the upper right side.
So on the right side of the plate, you have the zora, the roasted shank bone. The sources explain that this sits on the right because the right side represents the sephira of cheesed.
Cheesed.
Right. Cheese is loving kindness, it's expansion, it's the boundless, unrestricted giving of energy outward.
I had to pause when I read that section because the zero represents the Passover lamb, and the text explicitly says the roasting of this lamb was a way of scorching the ego.
Yeah, that's a strong visual.
Why in the world is the violent act of scorching an animal associated with loving kindness and boundless giving? It sounds like judgment.
It seems contradictory until you understand what the lamb represented in that ancient context. The Egyptians worshipped the lamb. Yeah, it represented their astrological power, the constellation of Aries, which falls exactly in the spring month of Nisan. It was the ultimate symbol of Egyptian dominance, power, and the ego's control over nature.
Interesting.
By taking that specific animal, scorching it over an open fire, and offering it up, the Israelites were taking the ultimate symbol of their oppressor's ego, burning away its dominance and nullifying it.
Oh, I see. So true cheesed, true giving isn't just being nice.
No.
It requires the active, intentional destruction of the animalistic ego. You cannot truly give to another person if your underlying motive is still self-preservation or self-aggrandizement.
Exactly.
By scorching the ego and placing that symbol on the right side, we are aligning our foundational spiritual energy with the boundless giving of the divine, completely unhindered by our own selfish calculations. It's the gas pedal of the soul, expansion.
But of course, if you only have a gas pedal, you crash the car.
Right.
Which brings us to the left side of the dashboard. On the upper left of the plate sits the batitza, the roasted egg.
Yeah.
Right. The text says this represents the sephira of Gevurah, which is judgment, discipline, restriction, and contraction.
The explanation for why an egg represents judgment is honestly one of the most brilliant psychological insights in this entire stack of sources.
It really is.
Think about how an egg reacts to heat. Almost everything else in the natural world melts, softens, or breaks down when you boil it or roast it. Metal melts, vegetables turn to mush, ice becomes water.
Sure.
But an egg does the exact opposite. It hardens. The more heat you apply, the more rigid and calcified it becomes inside its shell.
And the text uses this physical anomaly to symbolize how the ego of Pharaoh reacted to pressure.
Oh, wow.
Through the heat of his own desires and the intense heat of the plagues, Pharaoh didn't soften. His heart hardened. He doubled down on his tyranny.
So the egg sits on the left side to remind us of the immense resistance we face, both externally and internally.
Right. Gevurah is the boundary. It's the necessary restriction. If you only have boundless expansion cheese, you just have chaos.
A river without banks is just a flood that destroys everything in its path.
Exactly. You need the banks, the container, the discipline of Gevurah to give the expansion shape and direction.
This tension between cheesed and Gevurah is basically the core drama of human relationships, isn't it? Like, look at parenting.
That's a perfect example.
If you parent entirely with unbound cheesed, you give your child everything they want, you never say no, you never let them experience failure, you ruin them, you create a monster. You need Gevurah.
You need rules.
You need rules, boundaries, and the word no. But if you parent entirely with Gevurah, rigid, unyielding rules, harsh discipline, no warmth or expansion, you traumatize the child. It becomes calcified discipline. It becomes Pharaoh's hardened heart.
And that is exactly why the cedar plate doesn't leave us bouncing between these two extremes. Right in the center, bridging the roasted bone of boundless giving and the hard-boiled egg of rigid judgment, you have the mirror.
The bitter herbs.
Right. The center column in the Kabbalistic tree of life is Tiferet, which translates to beauty, harmony, or compassion. It's the synthesis of Cheesed and Gevura.
I struggled with this initially, I have to admit.
Oh, why is that?
Well, if Tiferet is the synthesis, the harmony, the ultimate beauty of the soul, why is it represented by something that literally makes your eyes water and your mouth burn? You'd assume this symbol for harmony would be something incredibly sweet, like honey.
Yeah, but it forces us to redefine what true harmony actually is in a broken world. True harmony isn't naive sweetness. It isn't slapping a smile on a tragic situation and pretending everything is fine.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
The text argues that genuine compassion, Tiferet, requires an acute, agonizing awareness of the bitterness of exile, of the pain of the ego, of the suffering of others. You cannot have genuine empathy if you are completely insulated from the bitterness of reality.
So the mirror in the center grounds the entire dashboard. It acts as the reality check. It says, to properly balance your boundless capacity to love with your strict necessary boundaries, you must deeply physically feel the painful, bitter reality of the human condition. Empathy without the taste of bitterness is just empty pity.
The cedar plate isn't just a collection of historical symbols. It is an intricate, interactive schematic. And that's just the top half of the plate.
Right.
The sources go on to map the lower items. The Heraset is Netzach, the Karpas is Had, and the Chazaret as Yesod. When you look down at that plate, you are looking at a complete structural diagram of your own potential.
We have the map in front of us. The hardware is laid out perfectly. We know what the ideal system looks like. But looking at a map doesn't get you to the destination.
No, it doesn't.
How do we actually turn the system on? How do we boot it up and begin the overwrite? This is where the physical acts of the Seder begin, triggering the first massive download of spiritual light.
And the sequence of these first few steps contains a paradox that honestly blew my mind.
You're referring to the extreme whiplash between Kadesh and Karpas, right? The first two sequential steps of the Seder.
Yes. The Seder officially kicks off with Kadesh, which is reciting the sanctification blessing over the first of the 4 cups of wine. The text states that this specific action brings in a state of gadlut immediately.
Gadlut translates to great consciousness, or an expanded, divine, enlightened state of mind.
Right.
The sources are highly technical here, calling it Gadlut Bet Demoshin de Chukma, which essentially means the absolute highest level of expanded consciousness regarding divine wisdom.
Okay, wow.
What makes this so shocking is that it violates every established rule of spiritual progression in the Kabbalistic framework.
Because normally, growth is agonizingly slow.
Exactly. You start in a state of catnut, small consciousness, you're petty, you're reactive, you're limited by your physical senses. And through intense daily work, study, ethical behavior, and restriction, you slowly, painstakingly climb your way up the mountain toward Gadlut. But on Passover night, the rule book is just thrown out the window. At the very first moment, with the very first sip of wine, before you've even eaten the matzah or done any of the internal processing, you don't start at the bottom of the mountain.
No, the Creator drops you off at the summit.
You're given a massive, entirely unearned burst of Gadlut.
The text calls it a spiritual loan. It's a massive injection of high consciousness given to us strictly as an emergency measure to pull us out of the absolute muck of our ego.
Right.
We were so deeply embedded in the Egyptian mindset, so consumed by the religion of selfishness, that we couldn't even initiate our own rescue.
The analogy that came to mind reading this is a car sunk up to its axles in thick mud.
Okay.
You can sit in the driver's seat and gently tap the gas pedal all you want. You can try to do the gradual incremental work, but the tires will just spin. You're stuck.
Yeah, you're not going anywhere.
You need a massive external tow truck to yank you out of the ditch with a force you literally cannot generate yourself. Kadesh is the tow truck. It is the divine reaching down and violently pulling you out of the Egyptian mindset in an instant.
But the sources are keenly aware of the profound psychological danger in unearned spiritual highs.
Oh, totally.
If you are handed enlightenment, if you're given a glimpse of the summit without having walked the trail, the ego, which is still very much alive inside you, will immediately hijack that light.
The ego will absorb that expanded consciousness and say, look how holy I am, look how enlightened and special I am compared to everyone else.
Which brings us right back to the Egyptian sorcerers.
Yeah.
Using high spiritual light to feed the dark void of the ego.
Yeah.
So if the Creator just gave us this massive loan of Gadlut to free us, it makes total sense why the very next step of the Seder plunges us straight back down into the dirt.
Right. Step 2 is Karpas. taking a simple vegetable, usually parsley or celery, and dipping it into salt water. And the text says this act brings us violently into Ketnut's small consciousness.
Without that immediate jarring plunge into catnut, the rescue mission would fail. The ego would claim the gadlut as its own doing.
So karpas brings us violently back to reality.
It is the humbling anchor that makes true, sustainable growth possible. The text notes that the word karpas mathematically and symbolically represents severe judgment. It drops you from the high heavens of the first cup of wine right back into the stark reality of your own unresolved issues.
The instructions in the source text for the internal mindset you must hold while eating the karpas are brutal.
They are very intense.
It says that when you eat this little green vegetable, you aren't supposed to be having pleasant thoughts about spring or rebirth or agriculture. You're supposed to actively look at your deepest flaws. You're supposed to confront your points of pride.
Yeah.
The salt water isn't just a seasoning. It represents tears, judgment, and the painful vitality of recognizing exactly how fractured you are and how far you still have to go.
It's a brilliant psychological mechanism designed to prevent what modern psychology calls spiritual bypassing.
Oh, spiritual bypassing.
Right, the tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks.
It's wanting the high of the meditation retreat without the grueling work of fixing your marriage or apologizing to your children.
Exactly. The Seder says we are absolutely not doing that. Here is a momentary taste of infinite light so you know the destination exists. Now eat this salty piece of celery, feel the smallness of your current state, and think about how selfish you were to your spouse this morning.
Wow. It demands profound accountability.
It does. But the texts are careful to point out that this catnut, this smallness we feel during karpas, is not meant to induce depression or self-loathing.
Because depression is just another trick of the ego, right?
Yes, exactly. It's a way of obsessing over the self. The smallness should awaken a yearning. It should create a deep desire for the true, earned greatness that we're going to build step by step throughout the rest of the night.
So we've been yanked out of the mud by the tow truck, we've faced our flaws in the salt water, and now the system is ready for the core installation.
Right.
We are ready to interact with the ultimate symbol of the night, the piece of hardware that defines the entire software update, the matzah.
The matzah is formally introduced into the process during the step called yachatz, which is the physical breaking of the middle matzah into two uneven pieces.
And the Kabbalistic decoding of this act is where the text gets incredibly dense, but profoundly rewarding if we break it down.
Yes, it really is.
The sources explain that the matzah is fundamentally defined by the Torah as lechem oni, the bread of poverty, or the bread of restriction.
To understand the mechanism of this poverty, the text delves into the secret of the Hebrew letters. In the Kabbalistic view, the Hebrew alphabet isn't just a system of communication. The letters are the energetic building blocks of reality.
Right.
The text explains the full, unbroken middle matzah represents the Hebrew letter Hate.
Structurally, if you look at how a scribe draws the letter, hey, it's composed of two other distinct letters.
Let's break that down.
You have a dale, which looks like an upside-down L forming the roof and right wall, and then a smaller vav, which is a small vertical line hovering inside the space on the left, not quite touching the roof.
Right. When we perform yachatz, we are physically reenacting the breaking apart of the letter. Hey, we snap the matzah into a larger piece and a smaller piece.
And the text states that the larger piece, which takes the conceptual shape of the dale, is kept on the table for the meal. The smaller piece, representing the vav, is wrapped up and hidden away as the afikoman.
Let's decode the psychology behind these letters. Why do we intentionally keep the piece representing the dale on the table to be eaten later?
The text says dale stands for dalut, which means poverty, emptiness, or lack. Why is poverty the central feature of a feast celebrating freedom?
This is the crux of the matzah's spiritual technology, and it challenges everything we think we know about fulfillment. We keep the symbol of poverty for the main event because true spiritual wealth, true divine intellect, can only enter a vessel that knows it is empty.
If a cup is already full of dirty water, you cannot pour clean water into it.
Exactly. If your psyche is completely full of your own ego, your own opinions, your own demands, there's literally no room for the divine to enter.
It's the ultimate paradox. Matzah is flat, it's tasteless, it's hard. It literally lacks the yeast, the inflation, the ego. It represents absolute lack. Yet the text insists it is the singular key to freedom.
The text relies on the concept of simsum, which means contraction or restriction. By eating the matzah, we are physically ingesting the concept of restriction.
Right.
We are agreeing to restrict our immediate animalistic desires. We're stating, through action, I do not need to be constantly filled with my own ego.
By intentionally emptying ourselves, we create a spiritual vacuum.
Yes, and in the metaphysical realm, a vacuum created by the removal of ego is instantly filled with the light of the Creator.
I think about this in the context of how we define freedom in modern consumer culture. Today, we're told that freedom means having absolutely everything we want exactly when we want it. Freedom is limitless consumption.
Oh, absolutely.
I want that new car. I finance it. I want a specific kind of food from across the world at 2 a.m. I open an app and someone delivers it to my door. I want validation. I post a photo and watch the likes roll in. We equate freedom with the total absence of restriction.
But the Kabbalistic view argues forcefully that this modern definition of freedom is precisely the definition of slavery.
Wow.
If you are entirely dictated by your appetites, if you cannot tolerate a moment of lack or unfulfilled desire, you are a slave to your impulses. You're trapped back in Egypt, building pyramids for Pharaoh, only now Pharaoh is your own neurochemistry.
So the matzah teaches that true freedom is the exact opposite of limitless consumption. True freedom is the ability to restrict.
Right.
It's the capacity to endure the poverty of the ego, to sit quietly with a lack of immediate satisfaction in order to make room for something higher. The flat, uninflated matzah is the ultimate rebellion against the Egyptian religion of selfishness.
And what about the piece we hid away? The text mentions that the broken piece, the vav, which becomes the afikoman, represents the zivug.
The future unification of all things.
Exactly. It's the massive, infinite light of final redemption that we cannot yet handle. Our vessels aren't pure enough yet, so we hide it.
Nice.
We keep the poverty, the delit, on the table, because that is the reality of our current work. We must operate in the present from a place of humility and restriction, trusting that the hidden light is waiting for us.
It's brilliant. We're literally eating restriction to build the new operating system.
Yeah.
But intellectually recognizing our emptiness is one thing. Sitting there and thinking, I am humble, I have restricted my ego, that's too easy.
Way too easy.
The Seder isn't just a quiet, detached meditation on humility. It demands that we actually taste the bitterness of our past ego. We don't just look at our flaws, we have to physically chew them. And that brings us to the most visceral part of the night, the mirror.
Step 5 in our exploration covers mirror, the haraset, and korek, the sandwich.
Right.
We touched on the mirror earlier when mapping the Seder plate as the center column of empathy. It represents the concept of death, the intense bitterness of the ego, and the acute pain of separation from the divine source.
And the text makes a profound, almost jarringly specific point regarding the physical act of eating the mirror. It says you must chew the bitter herbs.
You can't just swallow it.
Exactly. Usually people hate the taste of horseradish or bitter romaine, so the instinct is to just swallow it whole like a pill, maybe chase it with some wine, just to get the ritual over with. But the text says if you swallow it without chewing, you haven't fulfilled the spiritual obligation. You haven't triggered the update. Why?
The psychological necessity of that instruction is profound. The Kabbalists are insisting that you cannot bypass the pain of true growth.
Yeah.
If you just swallow the mirror whole, you're intellectually acknowledging your flaws, but you're refusing to feel the reality of them. You're trying to skip the friction.
It makes me think of someone going to therapy. You can read a dozen self-help books, sit on the couch and say to the therapist, yes, I logically understand that I have childhood trauma, and I understand that it causes me to lash out at my partner.
Right.
You've swallowed the pill whole, but until you actually cry about it, until you feel the agonizing grief of that trauma, until you do the incredibly hard daily work of changing your reactions in real time, nothing changes.
That is the exact mechanism. You have to grind the bitterness in your teeth. You have to experience the granular, stinging, uncomfortable reality of your own selfishness.
You have to feel the burn of your own ego in your sinuses.
Yes. The text states that this intense friction, this act of chewing, is what actually breaks down the death aspect of the ego and grinds it into a manageable material that can finally be transformed.
But the genius of the system is that it doesn't leave us in that state. If we just sat around a table chewing pure bitterness, grinding our flaws in our teeth, we'd fall into absolute despair.
We would hate ourselves.
The weight of our own toxicity would just crush us. And that brings us to the haraset, the sweet paste made of apples, nuts, wine, and spices that we dip the mirror into before eating it.
The haraset represents the hidden mercies of the Creator, what the texts call chassidim. And the textual analysis provided here is truly remarkable.
The gematria part.
Yes, the source delves into the gematria, the mystical numerical value of the Hebrew word haroset, to reveal its internal engine.
Let's walk through this Kabbalistic math because it completely changes what that sweet apple paste means.
So the text extracts two specific words hidden within the total numerical value of haroset. The first is Rut, or Ruth, the famous biblical figure. The numerical value of the letters in Ruth is 606.
Ruth is a fascinating figure to hide inside the haroset. I mean, she is the ultimate outsider.
She really is.
She was a Moabite princess, hailing from a nation that was historically hostile to Israel, representing a profound level of ego, foreignness, and separation. Yet she actively restricts her ego, leaves her royal status, converts, embraces poverty, and eventually becomes the great-grandmother of King David, establishing the Messianic line.
She represents the ultimate radical transformation of bitter ego into holy loyalty.
Wow.
And the remaining numerical value in the word haroset, after you subtract the 606 of Ruth, equates to the word sac.
Sac.
Right, which the mystical text linked directly to the tree of life, the ultimate source of divine vitality. So hidden inside the seemingly simple sweet paste is the spiritual force of radical transformation Ruth and the divine life force sac.
So when we take the bitter myrrh and dip it into the harissa, we aren't just adding sugar to make a terrible taste palatable.
No, we are actively applying the spiritual forces of transformation and divine mercy to our darkest, most bitter flaws. We're sweetening the severe judgment so that the awareness of our toxicity doesn't destroy us.
It gives us the precise amount of life force necessary to endure the bitterness of self-reflection without falling into the abyss of despair.
Exactly. The act says, yes, your ego is bitter, and yes, you must chew it, but you have the capacity to transform it, and you are sustained by a divine life force that wants you to succeed.
Which leads perfectly into korek, the sandwich. We have handled the components individually, and now we combine them. We take the matzah, our readiness to work, our humility, our active restriction.
Right.
We take the mer, the acute recognition of our toxic traits, and the bitterness of our ego, and we bind them together.
The text points out that Hillel, the great sage of the Talmudic era, used to wrap the Passover offering, which is the roasted lamb of cheese, the matzah, and the maror all together and eat them in a single bite.
Wow.
It's the ultimate synthesis of the night's work. You cannot have the redemption without the humility, and you cannot have the humility without the acute, stinging awareness of what you are being redeemed from. You bind the problem, the tool, and the goal into one physical reality.
It really is psychological surgery executed over dinner.
It is.
We have diagnosed the ego as the Egyptian malware. We have humbled ourselves with the salt water. We have ingested the poverty of the matzah. We have chewed the bitterness of our flaws. And we have bound it all together with the mercy of the haroset.
And now, according to the sources, the system is finally clean.
The malware is gone. The hardware is prepped, formatted, and ready. We are finally ready to actually consume the light in its purest form. We're ready for the meal.
The meal itself is called Shulchan Ores, the set table. And in this Kabbalistic framework, eating the meal is not a break from the spiritual work.
It's not halftime.
No, it is the climax of the entire operation.
I have to admit, I always thought the meal was just dinner. You rush through the first half of the Haggadah, you get through the symbolic food so you can finally get to the brisket and the potatoes.
Right, everyone thinks that. But the text says the meal is a zivug, a profound spiritual unification. Yes. The text is exceptionally clear that if you have done the internal work properly, if you have restricted your ego with the matzah and faced your bitterness with the maror, then the mundane physical act of eating the meal becomes a way of elevating physical starks.
It ceases to be gluttony. It ceases to be about consuming warmth for the self.
Exactly.
So if I'm sitting there eating that brisket and my internal consciousness is not, wow, I'm starving, I want to devour this to satisfy my own cravings, but rather I'm consuming this complex physical energy specifically to give my body the strength to connect with the divine and to serve others, then the eating itself transforms into a holy act.
It becomes a direct line of connection to the Creator. The physical food is merely the carrier wave for the spiritual light.
That's a great way to put it.
The text states that when a person eats with this highly refined consciousness, they're performing a cosmic unification. They're actively pulling down new altruistic spiritual lights into the physical world. They're bringing heaven down to the table.
But the meal isn't the end of the night. After the plates are cleared, there's a lingering mystery to resolve.
Yes, Safun.
At the very end of the meal, we have safun, the eating of the hidden afikoman. We mentioned earlier that the afikoman represents the vav, the piece of the broken matzah we hid away at the beginning of the night.
The word safun literally means hidden. It represents the massive, currently hidden desires within us that we cannot yet safely use.
Right.
It's the infinite light of the Creator, the final redemption that is still too powerful for our current limited vessels to hold permanently.
I was struck by the dynamic of how the afikoman is handled. Why is it a universal tradition that the children are the ones who hide and find the afikoman? Why not the head of the household?
The text explains this with beautiful precision. The afikoman represents a light so intense, a reality so profound and unbounded, that we cannot process it with our current rational adult intellect.
Okay.
To interact with that level of the divine requires acting above reason, and who naturally operates above the rigid constraints of cynical logic? The child.
The adult mind is constantly calculating. It's bound by what's realistic, what's practical, what has failed in the past.
Exactly.
But the child represents pure faith. The child possesses the willingness to jump into the unknown, to believe in a reality that defies the physical laws of nature.
By having the child retrieve the afikoman, we are collectively acknowledging that our spiritual journey isn't over. We've done the rigorous adult work for tonight. We've achieved a level of freedom from our immediate Egyptian ego.
But there are future massive redemptions waiting for us.
There are levels of consciousness that we can only access when we're willing to let go of our rigid intellects and approach the divine with the open, boundless, uncalculated faith of a child.
And then finally, we reach the last step of the Seder, Nirtza. Nirtza translates to accepted or desired.
The text states that at this point, if we have navigated the map correctly, if we've endured the restriction and the bitterness, our internal work becomes acceptable to the divine.
The internal evil, the selfish, bloated ego, has been successfully transformed into a vessel for good.
The software update is complete, and the system reboots.
We've spent an hour decoding incredibly dense ancient texts, mystical Hebrew letters, and complex psychological maps. But I want to bring this right back to you, the listener, right where you are today. Because the beauty of this framework is that it isn't locked away in a mystical vault.
No, it's not. If we synthesize everything we've discussed, the entire Night of the Seder is a meticulously designed process of breaking the vessels of our old ego.
Right.
It's about using the most basic elements of the physical world, the tastes, the textures, the friction of chewing, to pull down new, altruistic, spiritual lights.
You do not need to be a Kabbalist with a long white beard to apply this technology to your life. The mechanics are universally human.
Very true.
You can practice the restriction of the matzah tomorrow, choosing not to react in anger, choosing to withhold your ego in an argument to leave room for the other person.
Yeah.
You can practice the mirror, having the sheer courage to honestly look at your own toxic traits and feel the sting of how they affect your family without running away or numbing it. And you can practice the zroa, the chirst, pushing yourself toward boundless, altruistic love for the people around you, balanced by the healthy boundaries of the gevura.
I think this raises an important question, a final thought to leave everyone with, building directly on the text's concept of the zasun, the hidden afikoman.
Let's hear it.
We spend the entire night of the Seder aggressively breaking our ego, meticulously cleaning out the hametz from every corner of our psyche and enduring the mirror to achieve a state of freedom.
We reach Nirtza. We think we've made it. We think we are done.
But the afikoman represents the desires we don't even know we have yet. It's the hidden, undiscovered dimension of our soul. So consider this. What if true spiritual liberation isn't about reaching a static, boring state of perfect peace where you never struggle again?
Oh, wow.
What if true freedom is realizing that the moment you conquer one layer of your ego, a newer, more refined, more deeply hidden ego is waiting to be found and elevated tomorrow?
That is a staggering realization. The software is never fully updated. There is always a new version to install. The horizon of human growth is infinite.
The work of liberation is eternal.
And with that, we want to thank you for going on this deep dive into these incredible sources with us. It's dense material, but it fundamentally changes how you view a cracker, some horseradish, and your own mind. Keep questioning your own programming, keep learning to restrict the ego, and enjoy exploring your newly updated spiritual operating system. We will catch you on the next one. You know, usually when we talk about a birthday, there is this default expectation of just a completely uncomplicated celebration, like cake, balloons, the obligatory off-key singing.
Yeah, totally.
It is just so baked into our culture that another year of life is a straightforward victory. It is a binary of like, you were not here, and now you are here, and that is inherently good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate cultural touchstone. You
Yeah.
know? We just categorize existence as this absolute positive. To even question that on a birthday feels, it feels almost taboo.
It really does. But then you step into the world of these deep inner spiritual texts, and suddenly that birthday cake looks infinitely more complicated.
Right.
We are looking at a psychological landscape today that demands so much more from us. For instance, if you comb through the Torah, do you know who is the only person explicitly mentioned as celebrating a birthday?
I actually love this detail.
It is Pharaoh. Literally only Pharaoh.
Which is just an incredibly revealing detail when you understand the psychology at play there.
Exactly. Pharaoh is the only one who can celebrate without any friction, because to him, his ego is a god. He has zero existential angst.
Right. He is completely self-satisfied.
But the text we are exploring today asks this staggering question about the rest of us. Like, why don't the spiritual giants celebrate their births in that same way?
And it is such a profound answer.
It is, because birth at its core is about creation and revelation. So to genuinely, authentically celebrate being created, you would have to feel entirely complete and joyful about your existence.
Right, which is...
You have to be in a state where you are unequivocally thrilled with your place in the universe, with zero regret.
Yeah, to be entirely free of suffering, to harbor literally no resentment toward reality, that requires a profound spiritual completeness.
Which is so rare.
Right. Children can manage it, sure, because they live in this state of psychological smallness and, immediate presence.
Yeah, they're just happy to have a shiny toy.
Exactly. But for an adult, burdened by ego and memory and the sheer friction of daily life, to declare absolute, unmitigated satisfaction with creation, that is a phenomenally rare state.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. Today, we're unpacking an excerpt from a really profound work called Shazan Lamod by Rabbi Brandwein. And we are going to basically dismantle the human ego piece by shattered piece.
Sounds like fun.
Oh, it is. We are looking at the 15 signs of the Passover Seder from Kanesh all the way to Nurtza.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, we are operating under the assumption that you already know the physical mechanics of the Seder. We aren't here to, talk about ancient Egyptian bricks and mortar.
Right, no history lessons today.
Exactly. Rabbi Brandwein's text approaches these physical rituals as a highly detailed symbolic map of the Seder Hishtalshalut, which is the evolution and cascading descent of the spiritual worlds.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the Seder in this way, we have to start before the Seder even begins, like before time itself. We have to look at the cosmic setup long before physical reality ever existed. We are talking about the initial state of everything.
Right. And the text describes this initial state as a reality completely saturated with an infinite light.
Just everywhere.
Everywhere. There was no space, no lack, no concept of an other, just endless, perfect, infinite consciousness.
Wow.
But there is a structural problem here. For a relationship to exist, for a creation to have any kind of independent identity, there has to be space.
Because if a room is packed floor to ceiling with water, you can't put a sponge in there and expect it to absorb anything.
Exactly.
There's no room for the sponge to even be a sponge. It is just water.
That is a great way to put it. So to create this conceptual space, this monumental event occurred called a dimensum, which translates to a contraction or restriction.
Okay.
The infinite light literally withdrew its presence, leaving a conceptual vacuum.
And into this newly created vacuum, a single, very measured line of light was extended. The Kabbalists call this the Kav.
Right, the Kav.
And this line of light started to form spiritual configurations. The terminology here is partsufim, which literally translates to faces or profiles.
Yeah.
And the text specifically names 3 of the highest ones, right? Galgalta, AB, and Sag. But let's pause for a second, because faces sounds totally bizarre when we were talking about a pre-physical void. What does a face mean in reality before physical space even exists?
It is actually a brilliant psychological metaphor. Think about how you know a person. You don't know their internal infinite complexity.
Right, you just know what they show you.
Exactly. You know the specific face or profile they present to you in a given moment. A partsuf is a specific configuration of divine intent. It is a structured way for the infinite to interact with the finite.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. So Galgalta, A, B, and Sag represent these incredibly high, pure levels of this divine thought. Like pure wisdom, pure understanding. And they are illuminating downward into this new vacuum.
But they don't just go on forever. They hit a wall.
They hit a hard, definitive boundary, yes.
And the text calls this boundary the tabor, which translates to the navel.
Yeah, and the word tabor is actually an acronym in Hebrew for tav or, which means good light.
Okay, good light.
So it acts as this cosmic firewall. Everything above the tabor is pure, unadulterated good light. It operates entirely on the principle of giving.
Okay, so if the tabor is acting as this ultimate cosmic firewall, keeping the good light above, then the physics of this universe dictates that whatever is below it must be the absolute polar opposite, right? We're looking at a complete void of giving.
That is exactly what lies below. It is a realm called Malkut, or kingship. And its defining characteristic is a massive, overwhelming, monolithic desire to receive.
Just a total black hole.
Literally, it is the raw material of creation, the ultimate craving, the ultimate ego.
To put Malkut into a modern human context, I mean, this isn't just feeling a little hungry before lunch. This is the primal, unrefined ego.
Oh, yeah.
It is the part of the human psyche that experiences sheer parking lot rage when someone takes your spot at the grocery store.
Yes.
It's the part that demands instant gratification, that views the entire external universe merely as like a vending machine for personal pleasure. That is the raw desire to receive the navel.
That is a perfect description.
And this is where we hit the central physics problem of the spiritual universe. The light from those high configurations, AB and SAG, cannot cross the tabor into Malkut.
What's fascinating here is the fundamental cosmic rule preventing that crossing. It is the inverse relationship between vessels and lights.
Okay, explain that because it sounds counterintuitive.
Right, well, in our physical world, physics is pretty simple. A larger cup holds more water.
Sure.
But in this spiritual framework, the rules of reception are entirely inverted. To actually hold the divine light, a vessel, meaning a consciousness, must possess what is called equivalence of form.
Meaning it has to act exactly like the light.
Yes, the light is pure bestowal. So the consciousness must also be in a state of pure giving. If you are operating from that parking lot rage level of pure selfishness, you have zero equivalence of form with the light. You simply cannot hold it. It actually repels you.
But this creates an impossible paradox, because to draw the light down in the first place, you need immense yearning. You need a massive desire. If you aren't hungry, you don't order the meal. But if you are entirely selfish in your hunger, you lack the equivalence of form to actually digest the spiritual nutrients of that meal.
It is a total catch-22.
To make this relatable, the text provides a really striking analogy regarding marital intimacy. Let's look at the mechanics of that, because I think it clears this up perfectly.
The mechanics of intimacy perfectly map this paradox. Think about the intense physical yearning that initiates intimacy. That raw physical craving acts as a pump.
Right.
It creates the momentum, it draws the energy down, it forces the connection.
But the actual great light of the experience, the profound vulnerability, the psychological union, the feeling of being truly seen and loved, that light cannot be held by the physical lust itself.
No, not at all.
That profound light is only received in a totally different vessel. It is received in the refined vessel of selfless love, of mutual giving.
Yes. The physical desire pulls the experience into reality, but the equivalence of form, the selfless love, is the only thing that can actually contain its meaning.
Wow.
If you enter intimacy armed only with a raw, selfish desire to receive for yourself, you don't actually receive the light of the connection. You just execute a biological mechanism. You leave feeling empty because the vessel was wrong.
And bringing that back to the cosmic map, that is exactly why the highlights cannot cross the tabor. Malkut, everything below the navel, has the massive desire to pull the light down. It has the lust.
But it completely lacks the equivalence of form.
Right, it doesn't know how to give. And if those incredibly pure, intensely giving lights of the higher Partsufim were to directly collide with that raw, massive ego below the tabor, I mean, it wouldn't just be an empty experience, it would be a catastrophe.
It would be a total system overload, just a massive short circuit. The text actually compares this specific danger to Moses not being allowed to enter the land of Israel.
That always felt like such a harsh punishment to me, but through this lens, it's really a matter of structural physics.
Entirely. Moses represented an incredibly high, pure level of spiritual consciousness, very much like those highlights above the tabor.
Okay.
And the land of Israel represents the final completion, the ultimate reception. It represents Malkut.
Oh, I see.
So if Moses had crossed that boundary and entered, He would have forced the final completion of the spiritual system before the vessels, meaning the people, the reality itself, were ready to hold it.
Because the people didn't have the equivalence of form yet.
Yeah.
They were literally still complaining about missing onions and garlic in the desert. They were entirely still stuck in the desire to receive.
And if that pure light hit those unready vessels, they would have essentially burned up from the intensity. So a boundary had to be maintained. Moses stays on one side, the land on the other. Just like the highlights stay above the tabor and the massive desire stays below.
The entire purpose of creation is for the light to eventually fill that desire. The Creator wants to bestow, so we have this cosmic standoff. The system is gridlocked, which leads us to part 2, the rescue mission and the shattering.
Right, because the system cannot remain static. A bridge has to be built.
And here's the plot twist. The highest lights, Galgalta and AB, are stuck above the navel. But a very specific configuration called Nuqadat Desag can cross the firewall. It can actually descend below the tabor.
This is a crucial pivot in the psychology of the universe. Nuqadat Desag represents the pure attribute of Bina.
Okay, fine.
And while Bina translates to understanding, in this structural context, it really represents pure, unadulterated bestowal. It wants absolutely nothing for itself.
And because it has zero selfish desire, it is completely immune to the rules of that first description, the Zimsum.
Precisely.
Because the Zimsum was a ban on receiving selfishly. Since Nuqadat Desag only wants to give, it essentially holds a cosmic VIP pass.
I like that, a cosmic VIP pass.
Yeah. It just casually strolls past the tabor and descends straight into the chaotic realm of Melkut. I look at this like sending an incredibly patient, entirely selfless Zen master into a room full of greedy, hyperactive toddlers.
That is a great visual.
It goes down there to sweeten the intense desire, to introduce the mere concept of giving into a realm that only knows taking.
But, you can't just drop the Zen master into a room of toddlers without consequences. Below the tabor, there is no spiritual screen, no mechanism to filter or handle this kind of interaction.
Right, the toddlers are still going to act like toddlers.
Exactly. The massive ego is still there. And now it is vibrating against this incredible light of pure giving.
So the system has to adapt instantly to prevent that overload we talked about. It institutes a new, localized restriction. And the text calls this Jimsum Bet, the second contraction.
And the second contraction is essentially the blueprint for the human psyche. It literally splits the spiritual levels, and by extension, our own internal faculties right in two.
It creates a psychological divide.
Yes. On the upper side of this new divide, you have the inner vessels. These are the faculties capable of bestowal. The text associates them with the skull and the eyes. Galgalta Vinayam.
Skull and eyes, okay?
Right. These represent sight, intellect, faith faculties, refined enough that they can safely interact with the light without trying to consume it selfishly.
But then you have the other half.
The outer vessels. These are the faculties of pure reception, of taking. The text associates them with the ear, the nose, and the mouth. The AHP, Ozen, Chodam, Pei.
Because they consume.
Exactly. These are the faculties that consume. Hearing gossip, smelling food, eating. Because these outer vessels are driven purely by the desire to receive, they are deemed too dangerous.
So what happens to them?
Simsim Bet restricts them entirely. They are locked away, put on ice.
Okay, I have to stop and push back here because this is where the text throws a massive, seemingly contradictory curveball.
Oh.
We're analyzing a realm of divine planning, a perfect cosmic architecture, right? Nuqadat Desag goes down on a rescue mission, a new boundary is carefully formed to protect the psyche, and then the text says that the light of Hakma, the massive light of wisdom, expands, violently breaks right through this new, careful boundary, and shatters the vessels entirely.
The Shivyat Hakulim.
The breaking of the vessels. But why? If this is an omniscient divine plan, why introduce a destructive breaking? Why carefully build a system just to spectacularly blow it up?
It is the ultimate question of the human condition. Really, why does our reality feel so broken? And the text provides an answer that is entirely counterintuitive. The breaking wasn't an accident. It was a required feature of the design, engineered specifically for our benefit.
But how can a cosmic disaster be for our benefit?
Look at the state of Malkut before the breaking. It is a monolithic, impenetrable block of pure selfishness, a literal mountain of ego.
Right.
If you, as a finite human being, are tasked with transforming an entire mountain of selfishness into pure giving all at once, you will fail instantly. It is an impossible psychological load.
It's too much.
But the shattering, The shattering takes that massive, unmanageable ego and detonates it. It blows the mountain into billions of tiny, scattered shards.
Oh, wow. It fragments the ego so we don't have to fight it all at once.
Precisely. It scatters the vessels into tiny, manageable sparks of reality. And by doing so, it democratizes the work of repair, what we call tikkun.
Ah, tikkun.
Right. Instead of one impossible cosmic scale task, the repair becomes a collective effort spread over 6,000 years, distributed among millions of individual souls.
Yeah.
You only have to fix your specific tiny shards of the shattered reality.
Your specific anger, your specific greed, your specific relationships.
That's exactly.
To illustrate how this distribution works, the text brings up two really profound analogies, one historical and one modern. First, it compares the shattering of the vessels to the historical exile of the Jewish people.
Which, from a conventional secular historical view, the exile after the destruction of the Second Temple is purely a tragedy. It is the ultimate breaking of a nation.
But through this Kabbalistic lens, the text argues that this scattering wasn't a punishment, it was a deployment.
A deployment. I love that word for this.
The nation had to be shattered and scattered among the 70 nations of the world so they could absorb the traits, the cultures, and the hidden sparks embedded in every corner of the globe. They had to be dispersed to do the granular, boots-on-the-ground work of gathering those sparks to fix the entire world. The whole must be broken to retrieve the lost pieces.
And the second analogy the text uses brings us right into modern physics. It compares this spiritual reality to quantum entanglement.
I really love this part. When the shattering occurred, the higher, purer vessels of giving fell down and crashed into the lower, selfish vessels of receiving. And when they collided in the wreckage, they became entangled.
Meaning that right now, hidden within the lowest, most mundane, most selfish parts of our reality, there are trapped sparks of the highest spiritual lights. They're locked together.
Right.
The incredible implication here is that when you take a mundane action, say, conducting a super stressful business meeting or dealing with a very difficult neighbor, and you infuse that mundane moment with an intention of giving rather than taking, you elevate that lower vessel.
And because it is entangled with a higher vessel,
Pulling up the lower one yanks the higher spiritual light up with it, like pulling a chain.
pulling a loose thread and moving the entire sweater.
Exactly.
But the text has a critical warning here. It stresses that this is just a metaphor, because in quantum physics, entanglement is a passive, automatic property of the universe. Two particles just are entangled. But in the spiritual realm, entanglement is completely dormant until you activate it.
You cannot passively exist in the world and assume you are elevating sparks just by being a decent person. If you do not apply the active, conscious, psychological effort to transform your desire to receive into a desire to bestow, the entanglement remains purely theoretical.
The sparks stay trapped.
You have to actively do the work.
And that active psychological work, that is the Passover Seder. This brings us to part 3. The Seder begins. We are going to map this massive cosmic history of shattering and repair directly onto the 15 physical steps of the Seder, starting right from Kadesh.
Let's do it.
And again, we are assuming you know the physical action, so we are going straight into the esoteric mechanics here. Let's start with Kadesh, which is the blessing over the wine, and Yirachatz, the first washing of the hands.
According to Rabbi Brandwein, Kadesh represents the initiation of the repair. It correlates to those high spiritual levels we discussed at the very beginning, Chokmah and Bina, the parts of him of Avi and Sag.
And there is a mathematical blueprint hidden here. The gematria, the numerical value of the Hebrew letters, actually proves the connection.
Right.
The value of AB plus Sag perfectly equals the numerical value of the word matzah.
Which is just wild.
It isn't random at all. Kadesh is the initial flash of highlight that signals to the lower realms that the repair is beginning. And what do we immediately do? We wash our hands. Yirachatz. We physically act out the cosmic descent we just learned about.
Exactly how Nekadat Sag, that VIP pass of pure giving we talked about, descended below the Tabor to cleanse the lower worlds.
Yeah.
You take pure water and physically pour it downward over your hands. You are literally reenacting the initiation of the rescue mission.
But a human being can't just absorb pure spiritual light on an empty stomach, psychologically speaking. Like, how does the system prime us for this? That brings us to the third step. Karpas. We take a simple vegetable.
Rabbi Brandwein views karpas as a state of katnut, meaning smallness or infancy. Think about the psychology of an appetizer.
Okay.
If someone is impoverished and doesn't have much bread, they might eat a small, sharp vegetable to forcefully awaken their appetite so they can properly appreciate the main meal.
Oh, and
Karpas is a psychological appetizer. it artificially stimulates our spiritual hunger, our yearning for the massive light that we are going to reconstruct later in the night.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because you don't just eat the celery or the potato, you dip it into salt water.
Right.
We've done this since we were kids, but the text reveals the mechanics behind it. Salt carries a very specific, heavy, symbolic weight. Salt is the ultimate representation of strict judgment. It represents the uncorrected, harsh, physical realm of Malkut, that massive desire to receive.
I mean, if you take a spoonful of pure salt and put it in your mouth, it is agonizing. It burns. It is the unmitigated harshness of a reality that only knows how to take. It dries you out completely.
But here is the biological truth the text leans on. A human body requires salt to live.
Yes.
If you completely eliminate salt, your nervous system shuts down and you die. So look at the ritual. Dipping the pure, simple vegetable, the karpas, the light, into the harsh salt water is a physical integration.
It represents those higher, pure lights descending into the harsh judgments of our physical world and sweetening them.
Because you cannot escape the harshness of the physical world. You need the ego, you need the drive, you need the salt to survive, but it must be actively mitigated and sweetened by the purity of the spiritual.
It is such a stunning synthesis. And immediately after we awaken that appetite and sweeten that harshness, we slam into the most dramatic structural moment of the early Seder, yachats.
The breaking of the middle matzah.
You take 3 matzah, you pull out the middle one, and you physically snap it in half. Why? Rabbi Brenwijn connects this breaking directly to Tzimtzum Bet, the second contraction we discussed, where the psyche was split in two.
Remember the mechanics of Tzimtzum Bet? The inner vessels of bestowal, the skull and eyes, were separated from the massive, dangerous outer vessels of reception, the ear, nose, and mouth.
And look at the physical action. You split the matzah in two. The smaller piece, which represents those refined inner vessels that are currently capable of giving, is kept right on the table. We use it for the blessing.
But the larger piece, which represents the AHP, that massive, unfixable desire to receive that we had to lock away during the second contraction, what do we do with it?
We hide it.
We hide it. It becomes the afikoman. We wrap it up in a cloth and literally remove it from our sight, exactly as the cosmic system had to quarantine the massive ego because it wasn't ready to handle the light safely.
By hiding the Ephicoman, you are physically acting out the restriction of your own massive ego.
And the text provides a brilliant piece of structural engineering regarding why it must be the middle matzah.
Oh, the patriarchal lines.
Yes. The 3 matzah represent the patriarchal lines, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham is pure loving kindness, that's the right line. Jacob is harmony, the middle line. But Isaac, the middle matzah, represents strict judgment and restriction, the left line.
The Debatria lays out the blueprint here again, too. The numerical value of Isaac is 208. And the text explicitly points out that 208 is exactly 4 times the value of the Kabbalistic name Ben, which is 52.
And why does that matter?
It matters because Ben is the specific spiritual name associated with the heaviest, thickest, most stubborn desire to receive. Isaac is the structural pillar carrying the heaviest load of human selfishness.
Wow.
That is exactly why that specific pillar must be cracked. You have to break the strongest part of the ego.
It is pure architectural precision. Once the ego is broken and restricted, we can begin the work of elevating the sparks. This takes us right into Majid, the telling of the story.
The text connects the words Majid to Magadim, which actually means sweets or delicacies.
Oh, sweets.
Yeah. This implies that reciting the Haggadah isn't just an educational history lesson. It is an active mechanism. Through the physical act of vibrating our vocal cords, of speaking these specific truths, we are taking our desire to receive, which got its initial sweetening from the salt water, and elevating it to be further sweetened by the higher lights.
We are quite literally talking our psyche into a higher vibrational state.
We elevate the shattered sparks using the power of speech. And once the speech is complete, we move to the physical integration. This brings us to part 4, the shattering and the repair. This covers the steps from Raksa to Shulchan Aruch.
Okay, so we've done the intellectual work of Majid, so we wash our hands a second time. Raksa. We are cleansing ourselves to return to a state of pure bestowal before we eat.
Right.
This leads directly to Matzi Matzah, eating the bread of faith. This represents the light finally expanding downward into our ready vessels. But the second we swallow the pure masa, we are hit with the most violent reality check of the night, mer, the bitter herbs.
This is where the text drops a devastating revelation. We are taught as children that mer represents the bitterness of Egyptian slavery, right?
Right.
But cosmically, mer represents the catastrophic Shevarat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels itself.
The text notes that the numerical value of mer is exactly equal to the word mavet, which means death.
In the Kabbalistic timeline, the shattering is referred to as the death of the kings in the world of Nicodim. It was the exact moment the infinite light completely overwhelmed and destroyed the unready vessels. It is the absolute zero of spiritual collapse.
So when you eat it,
When you force yourself to eat that bitter horseradish to the point where your eyes water and your throat burns, you are physically tasting the tragedy of the cosmic collapse. You are internalizing the origin point of all brokenness, disease, and suffering in our entire universe.
but the brilliance of the Seder is that it never leaves you in the wreckage. Immediately after experiencing the death of the vessels, we execute the repair mechanism, Korak. We take the matzah, the pure light, and the mirror, the shattered death, and we sandwich them together.
This step represents the three lines of repair. You have the right line of cure-giving, the matzah, the left line of harsh restriction and brokenness, the mirror, and you force them into a binding middle line.
And to understand how this middle line actually functions psychologically, the text uses the analogy of a transport company manager. Let's build this out because it perfectly illustrates the human struggle.
Okay, yeah. Imagine a transport manager who has two entirely different factions in his company. On the left line, he has drivers who are pure, unrefined desire.
The ones who just want to speed everywhere.
Exactly. They want to drive 100 miles an hour, ignore all the red lights, and take massive risks just to get the job done instantly. If he lets them run the company, they will literally crash every truck. It will be a total disaster.
Right. But on the right line, he has drivers who are overly cautious, paralyzed by the fear of making a mistake.
Right, they want to meticulously inspect the trucks all day.
They never actually leave the garage. If he lets them run the company, nothing ever gets delivered. The business just dies of stagnation.
A terrible manager picks one side and fails. But a master manager intimately understands both extremes. He knows the chaotic, aggressive energy of the left-line drivers, and he knows the meticulous, protective nature of the right-line drivers.
He understands the mechanical limits of the trucks and the hazards of the route.
Yes. He takes the aggressive forward momentum of the left and tempers it with the protective caution of the right, creating a middle line, a precise route where the cargo actually gets delivered safely and efficiently.
Korak is you acting as the master manager of your own soul. You take your highest, most pure spiritual aspirations, the matzah, and you bind them together with your darkest, most bitter, aggressive failures and desires, the mirror.
You do not ignore the bitter parts of your psyche.
You integrate them. You harness their energy to actually move forward in the physical world.
And the moment you successfully integrate your brokenness with your purity, you sit down for the feast. Shulchan Orek.
Now, conventionally, we think, great, the deep spiritual ritual is over, pass the brisket, let's just relax.
Right. Fun part.
But Rabbi Brandwein makes it clear that eating the meal is not a break from the spiritual work. It is the absolute climax of it.
The text cites a truly arresting line from the Zohar regarding the festival meal. It says, "The time of eating is the time of war."
The time of eating is the time of war. Let's spend some time on this because it challenges everything about how we operate daily. Why is eating a war?
Because the physical act of eating is the most base, primal expression of the desire to receive for oneself. When you are starving, your consciousness narrows entirely to your own survival, your own pleasure, your own consumption.
It is the purest state of separation from the Creator who only gives.
Exactly.
Think about the modern psychology of consumption. We don't just eat, we consume mindlessly. We sit on the couch, eating food we barely even taste, staring at a screen, scrolling through endless content, entirely trapped in a loop of taking.
It is a trance.
Our ego is just a black hole of consumption. So when you sit down at the Seder to a massive, beautiful feast, your raw ego, your Malkut, wants to devour it purely for its own sensory pleasure.
And that is exactly where the battle lines are drawn. The war is the internal psychological friction of trying to elevate that mundane act. You are tasked with using your base animalistic hunger as raw material. You actually have to fight your own biology to elevate the act of eating into an act of bestowal.
You fight to eat not just because it tastes good, but to gain the physical strength to serve others. You fight to stay present, to connect with the people at the table, to recognize the divine chain of events that brought that specific piece of food to your plate, elevating the trapped sparks within it.
It requires an agonizing level of mindfulness.
It is a grueling psychological battlefield right there over the roast chicken.
And winning that war is what prepares us for part 5, the ultimate rectification, the final sequence from Zafun to Nurtza.
So what does this all mean? We survive the war of the meal, and what is the very next thing we do? Safun. We send the kids to find the afikoman, and we eat it.
Remember what the efikomen actually is structurally. It is the larger half of the matzah we broke hours ago.
AHP.
Right, the AHP. The massive, overwhelming, selfish desire to receive that we had to lock away during Zimsum Bet because it was too dangerous.
And the word safun means hidden. And the text explicitly states that safun is a code name for the evil inclination, the massive ego itself.
Look at the psychological progression of the entire night. We started with small appetizers. We broke our ego. We tasted the bitterness of death. We integrated our light and dark. We fought the grueling war of mindless consumption during the meal.
And now?
Now we have built enough spiritual muscle, enough equivalence of form, that we are finally strong enough to unlock the vault. We retrieve the massive hidden ego.
And we don't leave it hidden. We eat it. We consume the afikoman. This represents the messianic, perfected state of the human being, a state where, as the prophets say, the heart of stone is ripped out and replaced with a heart of flesh.
We finally possess the structural capacity to take our biggest, most selfish, aggressive desires, the ambitions and hungers that usually destroy our lives, and use them entirely and purely for the good.
We don't annihilate the ego. We recruit it.
Yes, we recruit it.
It is the ultimate triumph. We take the energy of our selfishness and point it toward the divine. Having achieved that, we move to Barak, the grace after meals, and Hallel, the songs of praise.
The text reveals that true blessing, true barak, is not just saying thank you for the food. It is the profound, retroactive realization that this entire cosmic map of breaking, restricting, and agonizing repair was a perfect, flawless chain of cause and effect engineered by the Creator.
It is the moment you look back at the bitter mirror of your life, the shatterings you endured, and realize they were entirely necessary and perfectly designed to bring you to this exact state of completion. And during Hallel, we pour the 5th cup of wine for Elijah. Why Elijah?
The text points out a numerical link. The gematria of Elijah connects back to the word ben, 52, which we established represents the heaviest desire to receive. Elijah represents the ultimate bridge between the two cosmic events, Simsim Aleph, the infinite light, and Simsim Bet, the shattered human reality.
He is the ultimate reconciler. At this stage, the divine light reaches so far down into the deepest, darkest pits of reality that there is nowhere left for darkness to hide. Which brings us to the final word of the night, Nurtza, acceptance.
At the end of the Seder Hishtalshalit, at the end of all spiritual evolution, all evil doesn't just evaporate. It violently flips to its polar opposite. It becomes good.
The text demonstrates this with brilliant Hebrew wordplay. If you take the letters for the word zara, which means trouble, distress, or suffering,
and you simply rearrange the exact same letters, you get the word ratza, which means favor, desire, or ultimate acceptance.
the raw material of the suffering literally becomes the vehicle for the favor.
And it repeats the pattern.
Yeah.
Take the letters for the word pesha, which means crime, sin, or transgression. Rearrange those same letters, and you get shefa, which means abundance, flow, and divine overflow.
The crime itself is reversed into abundance. Nothing in the universe is wasted. No pain is discarded. Everything is utilized and elevated. And Rabbi Brandwein concludes this massive theological treatise with a very grounding, almost humbling metaphor.
Yes, he compares all of this deep Kabbalistic study to looking at a map. We have spent this time reading the Seder, studying the coordinates of Simsum and Partsafim. We know the route. But staring at a map does not mean you have traveled the road.
Right.
He says we must pray to merit to actually do it, to take this intellectual comprehension and actively drive the chaotic, terrifying route of transforming our daily lives.
To synthesize this entire journey for you listening, Rabbi Brandwein's text completely obliterates the childish notion of what the Passover Seder is. It is not a passive historical dinner party honoring ancestors in ancient Egypt. It is an active, real-time psychological and spiritual technology. It is a laboratory for the soul.
But by physically snapping the matzah, by forcing yourself to taste the bitter horseradish, by fighting the urge to mindlessly devour the meal, you are not remembering history. You're physically reenacting the cosmic physics of contracting your own ego, intentionally shattering your comfortable illusions, and then painstakingly piecing your psyche back together with the goal of achieving absolute equivalence of form with the Creator.
It is about taking the primal human instinct to take and forging it in the fire until it becomes the capacity to give. And that brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with, drawn directly from the architecture of this text. We spent a lot of time discussing how the breaking of the vessels was not a cosmic accident. It was an intentional, highly engineered design flaw so that the massive mountain of ego would be broken into tiny, manageable shards that a human being could actually fix over a lifetime. I want you to think about the shatterings in your own life, the failures that kept you awake at night, the relationships that collapsed, the moments your carefully constructed identity or your career plans completely fell apart and left you feeling broken. What if those moments were not mistakes? What if those shatterings are not evidence that you are fundamentally flawed or permanently damaged? What if that was the necessary Shivarat Hakalim of your own personal universe? What if your ego, your rigid plans, your massive desire to receive had to be detonated into smaller, agonizing pieces so that you could spend the rest of your life doing the holy, granular, profoundly meaningful work of putting yourself back together exactly as you were always meant to be?
That is the true work of the Seder.
Keep looking at the map, keep driving the route, and keep diving deep.